Karp. This is your APTN News Brief for Thursday, April 4th. The Canadian Human Rights Tribunal continued its hearings on federal compliance with Jordan's Principle yesterday. And as testimony spilled into its second day, the tribunal heard from federal bureaucrats, First Nations leaders, and child welfare advocates. And under Jordan's Principle, First Nations kids are supposed to be able to access health, social, and educational supports within 48 hours. Critics say that's not happening nearly enough, pointing to a backlog of roughly one-third of all requests. Something Assistant Deputy Minister of Indigenous Services, Candice Saint-Aubin, was asked about on Wednesday. Here, First Nations Caring Society lawyer David Taylor asks her whether other community programs could help alleviate the backlog.
Is your view that existing programming in the community is sufficient to meet all the needs that are out there?
I can't speak for all existing community programming, but my opinion is we always like to have more robust programming where the leadership is leading it and developing it at the community level.
And if those programs are working well, and if folks are going there as opposed to Jordan's Principle, that would be a measure to ease the burden on the request system. Is that right?
I think it's one of many, as if folks know that they exist, because many don't even know that programming does exist within their communities, and if they're in urban centers, etc. I think that there's a bunch of things that could hopefully support mums and babies.
The federal government has promised to invest $1 billion into a new national school food program. Meant to supplement existing programs in other jurisdictions, it's projected to feed an additional 400,000 children over 5 years. Canada is the only G7 country without such a national school food program. Expected to be up and running for the 2024-25 school year, the funding will make up part of the government's April 16th budget, something NDP leader Jagmeet Singh called for earlier this week. To Manitoba, where First Nations leaders have weighed in on the NDP government's newly released budget for 2024. Sierra Bettens has more.
Following the release of Manitoba's 2024 budget, Grand Chiefs Cathy Merrick, Garrison Satie, and Jerry Daniels expressed mixed emotions. In this year's budget, boosting healthcare is a clear priority. That includes investing in Indigenous-specific health supports, like improving access to dialysis services in Norway House and Pimicikamak Cree Nation, and helping Indigenous organizations offer mobile services for sexually transmitted and bloodborne infections. The Grand Chiefs welcome these investments.
So there's been some investments made in healthcare in the north, and that will impact our First Nations in northern Manitoba. And those investments are much needed, and we're very pleased that we have that opportunity to receive the support we need in the north.
Southern Chiefs Organization Grand Chief Jerry Daniels added that funding quality healthcare is critical to closing the 11-year life expectancy gap between First Nations and non-First Nations Manitobans.
It's very important that we get healthcare right, that we create a health system that we can trust. And on the other side of that is obviously homelessness. Our people are struggling in the streets. There's safety issues there, there's addictions issues there, it's all part of health. And so we're going to continue working with the province and the officials to ensure that we get it right on that.
However, the leaders also noted a few critical items missing from this year's budget.
I was hoping that Island Lake area would get their hospital because there's 18,000 people within that area, so there was no mention of that.
Obviously, we want the province to move faster on the treaty land entitlements, the transfer of First Nations lands back, rightful lands. Millions of acres that's still outstanding, so the quicker we can see that happen, the better we'll be off for First Nations.
In a statement published by the Southern Chiefs Organization on Wednesday, Grand Chief Daniels commended the province on affordable housing and harm reduction commitments. Sierra Bettens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
And finally, a First Nation in British Columbia and the Archdiocese of Vancouver have signed what they call a sacred covenant, initialized this past Easter Sunday. Tina House has the story.
In March of 2022, a delegation from Canada, including residential school survivors and Indigenous leaders such as Cookbee Roseanne Casimir from Tk'emlúps to Secwepemc, traveled to Rome, Italy for a private audience with Pope Francis.
I went to Rome with hope of building meaningful steps towards reconciliation while seeking justice in whatever form the families of the missing children seek. I brought forth messages directly from survivors, as well as the realities of representing a First Nation now charged with the aftermath of a residential school, the sacred care of missing children in unmarked graves.
That historic trip concluded with an apology from the Pope over the atrocities committed at residential schools. And almost 2 years later, since that trip to Italy, here to Kamloops to Sequepum, where the initial 215 unmarked graves were first discovered in May of 2021, a special ceremony took place between the Archdiocese of Vancouver and the First Nation on Easter Sunday. Witnesses were blanketed and brushed off as the signing of the Sacred Covenant took place.
To sign a sacred covenant with the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Vancouver is to enact important steps of contrition, be it confirming historical records, sharing truths, and commitments to action. To sign it on Easter Sunday is a symbolic and significant step forward.
A few of the highlights of the covenant include the Church's commitment to help honor and memorialize former students of the Kamloops Residential School, creating more easy searchable tools to find documents, and the Church has retained scientific experts who have worked around the world to help identify those in the unmarked graves.
Truly, the residential school system did do great damage to Indigenous people, especially to their language, their customs, and their traditions. Unquestionably, the Church was wrong in implementing a government colonialist policy, which resulted in devastation for many children, families, and communities. We recognize, as Catholics, as the Catholic Church, our part in the resulting tragedies. But now we wish to journey with the people of the Tk'emlúps Nation on a path to greater healing, more understanding, increased respect.
The Archbishop says all records from the Archdiocese of Vancouver have been turned over so that families can finally find out the truth of what happened to their lost children and relatives. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
And that's your APTN News Brief for Thursday, April 4th. I'm Rick Harp.